In this episode, I'm joined by Martin Faulks, author, hermeticist, meditation adept, and memory expert. Martin recalls his upbringing in Norwich, England, including his childhood love of martial arts, the dissonance between an intellectual home life and schoolyard bullying, and an intuition for something more in life. Martin shares his first steps in practicing hermeticism according to Franz Bardon's methods, and offers the fruits of his unbroken daily practice of over 30 years. Martin also reveals elemental personality strategies for facing adversity and how to balance them, how to find one's authentic self amidst society's mixed messages of approval, and how the Renaissance-era memory techniques of Giordano Bruno can be used today as a path to enlightenment. So without further ado, Martin Faulks. Martin Faulks, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
I'm so delighted to be talking with you today, Martin. And I'm sure many people will know you from your prolific output as an author, as a publisher, on subjects ranging from meditation to memory, and also from your popular YouTube channel. But I would like to actually start earlier than that with your childhood and your upbringing.
Oh, my word. Right.
Yeah. I'm curious about that. What was the context of your childhood and upbringing? Okay,
so I was brought up in Norwich, which is in Norfolk. And my father had moved down from Scotland for a job, which was there's like a food research centre there. And they found him and my mother, they found a lovely little cottage down this sort of road, just sort of off the beaten track. And it was very close to a river. So a lot of my childhood was interacting with that river, actually. So my father, maybe because of his sort of, he was brought up on a farm, had a very sort of outdoor attitude. He grew everything that the vegetables we'd eat. He ran his own farm, as it were, sort of just from the small amount of land he had there. And he encouraged me to be outside a lot. So, that was kind of the natural place for someone to be during the day. And that worked quite well for me. And I tell you, now I'm talking to you now, I don't think I've ever really thought about it, but because, when you're young, you don't sort of think about things so much. I used to swim in that river probably every sort of few days or somehow get in that river, whether it's sort of trying to catch something or cross with something or something, all throughout the year. So yes, it was very, very much like that. And I spent a lot of my childhood was really full of joy for me. I really remember a very happy childhood. So I spent a lot of time with friends, playing in nature, a lot of time just watching things, finding things, exploring. And of course, very early on, I learned about martial arts. And I thought that was wonderful. That was wonderful to be able to take part in. My mother took me to a Hapkido class. I must have been 5 or 6. And actually, when you're that young, a martial art class is kind of taught through playing, isn't it? They kind of bring you in on that. But yes, I fell in love with martial arts from an early age because of that. And I think that's partly sort of where all this love of meditation and the potential of the mind came from. Now, as a child, I wasn't very engaged with school. I've got this academic family. Everyone's a scientist of some type in our family, but me. But I was so full of energy, so full of excitement and inspiration. It was hard for me to keep still, in a classroom. This sort of maybe this wildness when I was physically inside. It was tough. But, you know, my memories also of school, they were a bit challenging. There's some challenging, you know, other children and so on. It was always fun. Everything was, so I'm really very lucky to have had a good childhood. Now, here's the strange thing about that. People say that if you have a great childhood, it's quite hard to be happy as an adult, you know, that actually, because you're comparing. Well, I've found that's not the case. Yeah, I think it's, you know, whatever research that came from. I found a lot of people who've had a hard time, they're still dealing with things, you know. And that's not to say there weren't hard things in my childhood. My father and mother split up when I was 7. And, you know, she moved out and everything. God, it's quite hard to understand when you're 7, sort of intellectually and emotionally. That's the first sort of real big challenge for me in life. It's something that people watching this have probably all gone through. There's an initiation, you know, when you're young, learning to kind of deal with that change, then deal with change. It's a theme of life, isn't it? I think the next challenge, there you go. I think we all remember when our pets first pass away, don't we? That's kind of training for the future. You don't realize at the time that this is gonna happen to people, you know. God, I can remember that being a really tough thing. A really tough thing. You know, when our pet cat died. Wow, that's a hard challenge. But throughout this, there was a thread for me. I was always sure there was something more to human potential. Now, you know, when you're 8 or 9 years old, you don't know what a hermetic adept or a Buddhist bodhisattva is. You can't put it into words. And I think, but I used to watch things. I didn't get much access to television in my childhood, but when I did, I valued it. I used to watch things, and I think, yeah, something like that. There's going to be something like that. There's going to be some technique or some event that's going to reveal the real me. I was always waiting for that radioactive spider, or for that revelation that, you know, I was something more than I appeared. So I think that was the beginning of my search in life, and maybe people watching this, they can relate to that kind of feeling.
That's very interesting. And you mentioned trouble with other children in school. I suppose that's bullying or so, is it?
Well, yeah, so I don't think I had a particularly bad time of it, but as a character, even to this day, I'm quite sensitive with things. So everything's quite serious to me, and everything, maybe there's a higher level of thinking things out in me. So you can imagine this, you know, going into a school. So I had a very strict upbringing. Everything in my family is very organized. You know, my father as a character, what he said was true. So if I said, when's this happening? He said a time, that would happen. Okay. And he thought before he spoke. I can only remember my father ever seeming angry just a few times in life when something was dangerous. He's a very controlled individual. So, you know, you go into the school environment and it's not like that. People say things and they're unpredictable, and actually some of the way that people bond is through a bit of fun, a bit of banter, a bit of, wow, that was foreign to me as a child. You know, everything was straight speaking and rational and thought out. So yeah, I think there was a little bit of a challenge there for me at school. And I think there was a sort of maybe a difference. You've got these sort of this intellectual Faulks family who are, contemplating the breeding patterns of flowers, and at home there was always amazing things happening. My father would be stick insects or moths, or he'd be showing experiments that would burn candles in different colors, or we'd be looking at the sun through different lenses, or there'd be a telescope, or there'd always be these kind of exploration of things. This was just his nature. But I think, in retrospect, some of it may have been for me. We'd have solid carbon dioxide he'd sort of bring home that makes smoke, or he used to make his own fireworks. I don't think you could do that now. So I had all this environment, which is very rich and very beautiful and very full of admiration for the world. And then I went to this school, which is, some people have said to me that was a very, rough school. Well, I have some memories that perhaps show that could have been true. But I think I was quite physical and athletic, and probably avoided most of sort of the kind of trouble with that. So yeah, I think there were some challenges there. And I did notice, though, quite early on, that other people were performing far better than me. Now, this is for the amount of work they put in. I wasn't bottom of the class or anything, but I wasn't top. And it took me many years to realize why. I never made any effort. I believed that it would all absorb automatically. So I never, ever, until my teenage years, consciously made an effort to try to pay attention or remember something or study. Yeah, so I think I did quite well on natural ability. I'd never made that leap. It was quite an interesting thing. Some people are sort of born like that, aren't they? You remember people at school that were fully engaged, fully on target. Yeah, I think, whereas I wasn't there, I had other goals which weren't part of the system, Maybe my father was a sort of victim of his own success. I was far more inspired by the natural world. I was far more inspired by what was going on out there. I had other sort of goals, and yeah, I never had a vision of doing a job sort of forming. I mean, this is very young. But yeah, as time went on, so that's what kind of brought me into sort of some kind of order, I think, was martial arts. And that was an interesting thing. For some people, it might be a musical instrument. For some people, it might be an artistic thing. But martial arts taught me that there were some things that when I first started, I couldn't do in any way at all, that if I practiced, I'd start to get that ability. And it made me realize that I could change who I was as well. Now, my friend and I, we kind of met in, we got fast forwarding, I'm sort of 11, 12. We met when he came over from Australia to live here. We became the most amazing allies in our martial art practice. And we took everything that people said in martial arts literally. So there were sets of techniques where they'd say, right, these are knockout blows, and you hit here and you hit here, and then here. And we think, wow, okay. So, this is our blue belt syllabus, we'd go and try to get them to work, and then go back and say, this knockout blow here, it's not knocking us out, and we can't knock anyone else out. Can you knock me out with it? And you've got all these black belts and everything. You've just taken it on face value and never really thought like this. And you get a kind of answer. They can't say, well, actually, no, we've never really thought. Why don't these knockout blows really knock you out? They'd say, well, it's a very precise thing. There's a manual. And here's the pressure point. It's actually this point. So we actually went to an acupuncturist, said, right, here's a list. These are from a Korean chart. Is this okay? Do you know these? Yeah, we know these. Could you mark them on our body, please? So they marked all these knockout points on our body because we'd been told you had to get them straight on. Then we got a hammer. So wham, they still didn't work. The only ones that worked, actually, some of the ones on the head, yes, you can knock someone out if you hit someone there very hard, but they're not surprising you that if you hit here or here or here, yeah, those work. So we're in a kind of strange situation where we were pressure testing by genuine naivety and belief what we were being told. I remember a set of meditations, which we did every night, which were certain hand positions. They said they'd give you the strength of 7 men. Well, it didn't work out for us. So we'd ask our teacher to say, well, these are very deep things. And then when the Grand Master would come over, we'd ask her this. So we kind of were already trying to look for things we could see that would actually work in these spiritual arts. And my friend here, his name at the time was Joss, and now it's Atma. He's a Swami. He went into exploring the yogic and Eastern paths, and I found Franz Bardon, the hermetic teacher. I say hermetic, but Franz Bardon was aiming at universality. He wants to see the truth. He wants to see what exactly works. It was actually a friend of mine who got me studying these subjects. There was at our school, so we're back now. I'm in sort of the senior school now. We're sort of doing our A levels. One of our friends, he taught himself 8 A levels in a library where we did our sort of normal number. He was a very clever man, and still is a very clever man. He'd started studying metaphysics and these kind of higher things and got me interested, but it was never quite right for me. All these kind of golden dawn kind of things. So yes, I found Franz Bardon. It's quite strange. I had a sort of almost like what I wanted was something based on the elements, earth, water, air, and fire. I wanted something like that. And I wanted something where it was just based on me and the mind and these hidden forces. I just wanted straight. And that came in the form of Franz Bardon. And the moment I held that book, it was in a copy in Atlantis Books. So they're in London. If you haven't been to Atlantis Books and you're watching this video, it's time for a pilgrimage. Absolutely wonderful place. It was the hello again. I knew this path and it knew me. And that book has been, and the other books by Franz Bardon have been the greatest gifts of my life. Everything I've ever wanted has come true because of those. And it's allowed me to be who I want to be in life. So that's been the greatest blessing. We talk about my writing and publishing and things like that, but that's the book that anyone watching this should start with. Before my books, Franz Bardon's works, then do have a look at my writing. And I think these books, they're inspired. And that there's a good theme. I found that in life, genuineness is a superpower. And this may sound very different to what other people are saying. There's people out there telling you how to artificially design ways to make money or be popular or appear more confident or anything. All this stuff, it's a poor shadow of the genuine equivalent. I once went to a business seminar, and there's a guy there at the front with a whiteboard telling people, talk about your business, smile when you mention what you do, make sure you carry cards on you, make sure you have things with the logo on, make sure you spend time thinking about it every day. And I thought, crikey, the people I know who are doing the things they really want to do You've got to tell them not to talk about it. They naturally do accessorize, don't they? They've got a company that makes pet portraits. They've got their pet portrait on their bag. They've got cards with it. They say, "Oh, is that Poochie? Would you like to have a?" You have to. The enthusiasm bursts out. If you need a man with a stick pointing at a whiteboard telling you to tell people about what you find, what you're doing for a living, you need to be doing something else for a living. With my writing, anytime I've ever had a master plan, either from someone, a publisher that said, this needs to be written, it's going to be amazingly successful, we're rolling in cash from this, Martin, you've got to do this. Or when I thought, oh, there's a gap in the market, I've done that. That's never worked. What I found is if the muses come and hassle me and say, you must do this, I'm trying to sleep or trying to get on with my life, and the inspiration is getting to me. If I write that book, that's the one that everyone loves and finds valuable. So, I've learned never to do anything from impure motives. It's better not to do it. I think, so lots of people tell you when you're young, back to this kind of age, they'll tell you how terrible it is to try to be an artist or an actor or something like that, and how you'll have no money, you'll be struggling and living in a boat or something, and you're not going to have anything. But no one tells you how utterly soul destroying it is for someone with a spark of inspiration who wants to paint, or someone who's got something to express to the world, to be working in an accountancy office, no matter how much money they've got. No one tells you about that, and how hard it is to get out of that trap once you're in it. So genuineness is a superpower, a very important thing.
Fascinating. You said when you found the works of Franz Bardon, who I'd like to ask you a bit about actually, that you said, I knew the path and the path knew me. Can you say some more about that statement?
Yeah, so sometime I'd actually written down some of these sort of exercises earlier than that. I believe it or not, so teenage Martin thought, right, I'll design my own path, because all these drawing things in the air and the Hebrew correspondence and everything. I'm not saying there's not value in that, but that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to have direct contact. I want to be able to, if there are things I'm unaware of, I want to be able to see them, not speculate about them. I want to achieve a oneness with these hidden forces, rather than sort of this trying to careen them through sort of symbols and codes. So I started to design my own system, and I called it elementalism. And some of the exercises are actually too advanced for me at that time. Well, I didn't realize I need to get a lot of basics down. Yeah. And you see this as a tendency, because we move towards what's exciting, not what's needed. Someone who perhaps needs some bitter herbs to adjust their digestive system, and maybe needs some deep breathing to get their oxygen levels up, won't be very excited by those ideas. They'll probably be more excited by some, fad diet or something sweet and shiny. So yes, I was maybe I was remembering or kind of reflecting on these kind of exercises from before somehow. Now, is this sort of like an echo of a previous time, or is it just a knowing when something's right? Maybe a little bit of both. But what I do know is many people who come to settle on these teachings, it's like coming home in some way for them. When we start out in life, our awareness is quite low. So, the baby is just working the basics out. Is this hand part of me? Yeah, this is part of me. Is that spoon? No, it's not. I put it back in my hand, throw it away just to check it's not part of me. they're all sort of born long-sighted, so they have to sort of slowly learn to focus. Low awareness in some ways. As time goes on, our awareness becomes a lot more subtle, and a lot more distinct. After a while, we know the difference between us and other people, and we start to learn that other people are also self-aware. As we continue to evolve, we learn about playing. There's different levels of play. First form of playing is just that kind of random movement. Later on, you can play on your own, and you can play with people next to you. Then you can actually play involving people. As your awareness increases, we can all think back to when we were young and we didn't know some of the dangers in the world are real. You watch television shows and people are being hurt or things happen. There's sort of monsters and stuff. You don't know that monsters are actually kind of real. As you get older, there are some troublesome people in the world, and there's risks, and you become more aware. Now, this awareness, this development, if you have a look on psychological sort of maps of this, they kind of stop it at adulthood. So you grow up your awareness. And it's a mistake. It's a mistake. What they're saying is the top, is the beginning. And we need to start using methods to keep that going, because some of the things we're trying to do in the world, we're not equipped in terms of our awareness. So, humans, we're a bit sort of, we talk about that child doesn't know the risks are real. Most humans can't make decisions which are beyond their own life. Plant a tree they won't ever see grow up. Business decisions, if you're having to buy paper and it's either recycled and you're not going to be able to make as much money as you do if you buy new. Many people make a decision which is based on this lifetime. Incidentally, that comparison isn't quite correct. Recycled paper is often cheaper, but that kind of thing. We need to take to this next step. We need to keep becoming more aware, keep becoming more thoughtful, keep becoming more controlled. And that's a challenge as well, because that does mean you need to give up some things. As we continue on our path, our words become more skillful and powerful. So we need to have them more controlled and thought through. As we continue, we can act more skillfully and have a more powerful effect on the world. Well, let's use that responsibly. If we can see where people's powers and weaknesses and their development things, let's be kind and guide in the right direction. Let's make a decision based on the best outcomes for everyone, not just us. Hermes Trismegistus says, enlightenment is learning to view the world not from the position of your own body. It's quite an interesting statement there. Just not think of myself. So for me, Franz Bardon and other teachings, there's some wonderful, genuine teachings in existence, and which are not just that tradition. But the genuine path leads to a higher awareness and more mindfulness, prudence, and thoughtfulness in life. And I think we need that, because in the world at the moment, we're trying to crane decisions and changes and improvements. And a lot of the people we're trying to get to be involved in this aren't really engaged or awake enough to see the purpose. They can imitate what we're saying, but they're like that child we're talking about who doesn't know the danger's real, isn't quite aware that other people have feelings as well. And some of these people are big decision makers and powerful people. So that's why we need to promote the cure with things like this. So,
do you think, speaking of that, do you think that's always been the case, that there's been a kind of muddling through by, I suppose, luck and guessing or whatever, regular adult level awareness in terms of those that have steered civilizations, countries, and so on and so forth. Do you think it's always been the same as it is now? Or do you think there have been times when those in power actually had access to the sorts of things, maybe even the sorts of teachings or systems that you're discussing?
Yes, so enlightened leaders. Yeah. So, of course, Plato was looking for a leadership where you had these guardians who are enlightened leaders. And what he did is his idea was that you wouldn't be able to own anything or have any credit for what you did, so that if you were a guardian, you had nothing to win, so you could just be genuine. Yes, I think we're all a mixed bunch, and it's quite interesting, So I know some people who are some of the most wealthy and powerful people you could ever meet. People who I'm friends with, and they are wonderful, enlightened, thoughtful, positive people. But likewise, and at top of that spectrum, there are also people who are not so, and have used some very questionable means to get there or to maintain that position, because often these are sort of families who've got sort of power and so on. So I don't judge people by where they are, by their position, but I do watch carefully how they behave towards others and how they interact. So I think we have had a mixture. To begin with, you can achieve a lot in this world by forcefulness and by simple strategies, if you don't mind hurting others. And most people are trapped in one strategy or two in life. So let's think about these elements. I talked about earth, air, fire, and water. A fire kind of approach to life would be one of applying more forcefulness and ambition, maybe aggression, doesn't have to be overtly aggression, and using this sort of energy. And this can be really, really powerful if you're a businessman and you're willing to work. And this is interesting. I say businessman, it could be a businesswoman, but men tend to be more sort of full of testosterone and ambition and work longer hours. And in fact, if you look at the top earners in big business, they tend to be male, and they tend to be willing to work for insane numbers of hours that most people would consider ludicrous. So they won't do anything else. So this would be a fire strategy. You just put more energy in there, and keep hammering away, and turn the volume up if it doesn't work, and turn the volume up if it doesn't work. But it means you're not a very well-rounded person, and you tend to cause trouble, and there tends to also be trouble in your life. If you're used to just using fire as an approach, aggression and so on, you end up doing some strange things in circumstances that would involve tenderness or some form of empathy. And actually, people watching this have probably seen it. Have you ever seen someone tell someone off for being upset? You can imagine, this stockbroker who's used to saying, you do this, you do that, you do that. And their daughter goes through a sort of the first breakup. We're talking about some of these tests, and the childhood, probably the next one is the first breakup. And he says, put yourself together. There's plenty of more, fish in the sea. He's aggressive to that person because that's the only gear he's got. Other people, they're stuck in emotional methods. They're trying to convince people, maybe seem to be a little bit of a victim, or maybe seem to be a bit more inspiring or beguiling. They use a water strategy for everything. And they're very good at moving around things and becoming what isn't, might get the right result. Maybe some people are used to sort of an intellectual calculating method. So they think it through and they come up with plans and they work out the most efficient way. So they're not looking to work hard, they're looking to work smart. Maybe some people used to earth, a persistence. They can be doggedly, patiently doing this. And any opposition, they'll just ignore. They'll be resolute and solid like a statue in the face of adversity. All these are very good strategies, but if you've only got one or two, it can cause a bit of trouble and it can mean you're not very flexible. Now, why don't people tend to be more balanced? Well, it involves overcoming some stuff. Let's imagine, we're talking about childhood and about bullying. Let's imagine my bullying experience, was big. I said I had quite an easy time of it. Other people didn't. You can imagine how when you're 6, if you're getting attacked over strange things, or you're in a situation where friends keep turning on you, well, you could close down some emotional parts of you. You don't have time to adapt. You don't have time to come up with some good strategies. So you just come up with some ones where you preemptively attack that people. And you just cut off that. You don't get close to people. There are, 50-year-old people who've still got that strategy going on. And, maybe after a while, if you know them, they'll calm it down and so on. If you talk to them, if you say, hey, let's change some ways you approach things, you're going straight into their fears and worries, and they know that. So no, this isn't going to work. They'll back out of it. So the next level, unfortunately, does involve healing some areas or things you just didn't ever learn. Maybe you didn't ever learn to express yourself in an assertive way, which isn't aggressive. Maybe this wasn't a skill, you ever learned. Or maybe some areas are so injured, it's a bit like people have frozen shoulders. They don't have that calculating approach. Or maybe it worked too well for you. So well that you just can't believe there's another way of doing things. So the next level involves a bit of work on yourself. That's pretty tricky for some people to even get them engaged on that. And of course, I think it's Gerville who said, if men of virtue hold back from gaining power, who will have it? You can see actually some people, the trouble people often are better at working together. They're so united on that kind of goal. Whereas sort of more thoughtful, beautiful, contemplative people tend not to be able to get the team up with such passion towards things, and also maybe they've got some inner fulfillment going on, so they're quite content with less. You don't need to be tearing the world up to make objects for them and putting on a pedestal and singing songs to make them happy. So yeah, I think there's some reasons why perhaps at the top you might see some more trouble to some degree, but let's not judge everyone.
That's very interesting indeed. I wonder if we might come back to your initial encounter with Franz Bardon, the work of Franz Bardon, and you began practicing that system, and you've already said that martial arts taught you the lesson that you can actually, through practice, acquire a skill that you didn't have, and through that process actually become a different person. And yes. I think that's a lesson that I think characterizes a lot of your activity in life. You're a notoriously diligent practicer and acquirer of skills and trainer in systems and so on. So I think that's really interesting to see that theme developing throughout your life, and perhaps we'll talk about that as we go through some of the systems you've explored. But can you give us a sense of when you first opened up that Franz Bardon book and you began to practice things? What were you practicing? What was the experience? What did you encounter, and what was that initial experience like?
Yeah, so to begin with, I hadn't really done anything through discipline before. So everything was done through enthusiasm, you know, martial arts, me and my friend training together. Can I come to yours? Can you do this? And so on. Yeah, that practice. So it was a bit starty-stoppy for the first year. I was just a teenage boy. And Franz Bardon asks for you to give 2 hours a day, really. That's really what it was. So for the first year, I found that routine starting, stopping. And in that phase, you come up with all sorts of funny things. You know, your mind is looking for excuses to get away from this. It's kind of protecting itself because some of that self-development's about to happen. So you'll say, I don't have the time for this. But yet, you know, you'll spend hours watching television or hours just sort of playing computer games or whatever, rather than doing your meditation that you don't have time for. Or you'll say to yourself, this is too hard. And then you'll switch to this is too easy. And then you'll decide you want to do something else because you want something fresh and different. That's what it is. But luckily, I've got used to drilling things through martial arts. So I managed to stabilize this. And this is an important thing, you know. So when people talk about things, often they'll give you a reason why you should listen. And when it comes to these arts, when it comes to the control of the mind in meditation, or techniques for improving your awareness or for transforming yourself, sometimes those arguments are quite strong and quite outlandish. People will say, you know, either they'll give you lineage. They're saying, I'm the student of this person, of this person, of this person, of this person, of this person. And once they've established that, then they'll establish a power and greatness from what the early practitioners could do. They'll say, if we go back to Vedic times, they were sort of able to, you know, levitate and turn base metals into gold. And the idea is the current gives you trust there. Sometimes it's newness, isn't it? Some people will establish and say, this is the latest research and I've been reading this and I'm doing that. So that's the opposite. Instead of saying I'm part of a tradition, you're saying I'm part of this new proven wave of things, this new sort of technique of the mind or something. And then you get some other ones where the authority is higher. I'm a channel. There's a higher being that talks through me, a past life, these kind of things. Or secret knowledge, I know this from somewhere. If you're going to listen to me, it's not because of any of those things. I've put 2 hours of my life into this since I was, I think, 15, and I'm 45 this year. I have missed a session in that time. In that first year, I had some stoppy things, but I missed a session and one of my family members had a heart attack and I had to skip a session in the afternoon. But so I practiced that much. So that's my argument by authority. And I've made sure that practice is diligent and dedicated. So I've never just let myself get complacent or sit there. It's always been, what's the next step? What's the next step? If I've ever found myself slowing or not making progress, I have sought out someone or somebody who's part of a tradition which is a specialist in that area. And I found that being near people who are better than me at what I'm trying to learn to do, this is a very important thing. I found it's quite amazing. And one of my friends gave me like a slack rope, you know, it's like a tight rope, but it's slack. And what we found was if you left someone alone to learn it, it would take them about 4 to 6 hours to be able to just walk along it a bit without falling off. But if they saw people, there was some subconscious learning. Your body can see how they're holding their body. You don't know that you're doing this, but you're imitating them subtly. So you move it to an hour and a half, 2 hours. So for me to be able to sit with a Zen practitioner on a mountain and be able to learn from him a certain technique, or to be able to go to a monastery and learn how that memory method that's been handed down. This is a great honor, and this is really important. Now, I believe I've kind of got to the stage now where I can kind of tune into and can kind of see where anywhere I'm going is, but I have the humility to know that could change, and I might need help from someone else. So back to what was it like? So 2 hours. The first exercise in Franz Bardon's system is watching your own mind. This one of the first exercises. There's a whole regime that involves washing away negativity, body brushing, gymnastics or yoga exercises, breathing exercises, and meditation exercises. And the first meditation exercise is about watching your own mind and remaining aware. So this is just to give you a kind of vision of the kind of thing people do in our training system. And this is very interesting. Many people see this just as a watchfulness exercise. I'm going to watch my mind, watch what it does for 10 minutes and see if I can remember all that 10 minutes. Well, you discover a few things very early on. You discover, first of all, that most people can't keep aware for 10 minutes on that. You get caught up in your thoughts, forget you're meant to be watching them. And that people can't remember 10 minutes. And that's not just their thoughts. They can't remember 10 minutes of conversation very well either. So you start to improve these aspects of the mind. It really makes a big change, being more aware of what's going through your mind and more aware of what's happened. This is a big transformation. Then you start to realize there's a sort of therapeutic aspect. You're probably aware that most early forms of psychotherapy and talking therapy involve getting it all out. Someone gets you to lie down on a couch and says, tell me what you're thinking. You're doing this for yourself. In day-to-day life, you and I are always getting rid of obtrusive thoughts. We're trying to focus on what we're talking about here. And right now, if you start thinking about what your next meal is or something, you're saying, leave me alone. You just really reminded to focus. If you sit there and say, okay, mind, I'm here and I'm going to listen to anything you say. There might be some funny things you've been trying not to think about since you were young. There might be things you're denying about life. So to begin with, there's a lot that comes out. And you start to realize some lovely things from this. You know how if you ignore people, they start to shout a bit? Well, or start to sort of act out. A lot of the things that you thought were trouble in you aren't. They just go away if you listen to them. Because they're trying to do something. So if you're suffering from anxiety, it might be that your mind's trying to warn you about something. And when it hears that you're listening, it knows that you're paying attention. It goes, oh, okay. Right, so you are aware of that. Sorry, I was trying to get your attention. And it goes away. Or maybe there's a plan you've been working on and it's got a bit confused. Maybe all your life you've wanted to be popular, but that was a bit tricky, didn't work out for you. So you're starting to settle for important. And actually what you really want is friends. What you really want is to be able to walk in a room of people and them say, hello, it's lovely to see you. And let's just talk and look at the stars. And I brought something nice to drink and I just love being near you. That's what you really want. But many years later, you're the head of a legal firm and everyone's scared of you and you're important. But you really think the cure is going to be something higher, but that's not the truth. The truth is you want to be back playing in the river with your friends when you're a child or something. So that's what the kind of things you start to realize in this meditation. So that's the beginning. That's just the beginning. And in Bardon's system, you diarize everything. So when you have these kind of thoughts, you make sure they're there. Here's a top tip for anyone doing this. I've got diaries going back to my teenage years. Do something to mark big experiences. Because if you have a dream in your 40s and think, I've had this dream 3 times before, how are you going to find that? You go through, think, oh, so it wasn't in my 20s. It must have been earlier. You just read a diary for every year of your 20s. Right, okay. Oh, it was when I was 19. Yes, okay. I got that wrong. Do something to mark, put special dream, special insight, so you remind yourself. These exercises are a great joy and should be approached as thus. It's where you sort yourself out. It's so much time you spend in life sorting other people out, aren't there? Sorting other things. This is a time where you get to sort yourself out. We've got a limited time here. Let's look after this body. Let's evolve this mind. Let's have the best effect. Let's be who we really want to be. And don't let anything take that away from you. No set of ideas or creeds, no one close to you that asks this of you in order to be respected or loved, no amount of money, nothing, because you can't get that back. So being your authentic self is not available for purchase or rent. And that's why these exercises are so important.
That's very interesting. You're talking there about being your authentic self. And it's one thing to make that decision if the decision is clear, but it's another thing if one doesn't really even know who one's authentic self is. How do you get in touch with that current of authenticity in oneself?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. First of all, spending time away from other external influences does actually show the truth. That's actually quite interesting. So actually, I do try to spend a week every year, just you. Then you've got to reset. Yeah. Of course, I get quite a lot of time on my own in day-to-day life. But that reset where you actually get to see that truth there. Look at what you genuinely find yourself inspired, intrigued, and enthusiastic about. Be really cautious, because in our society at the moment, we've got a lot of mechanisms of approval that can confuse this. So let's imagine you do something exciting and extravagant, and you post that on your social media. Everyone jumps around and is full of joy about this. There's an approval that comes back. If you didn't do that, if you take away other human interaction, what's the truth about that? Now, I'm not saying that genuine respect shouldn't be part of your goals, but just be a little bit cautious. I've seen people who moved in the direction of what's popular or financially rewarding far too easy, and it catches you out, can catch you out. So follow your genuine inspiration. Let those muses advise you. And even if it doesn't seem as important as what other people are saying to you, even if you're fascinated by something, if it's there, have a look there. And often there's some kindness in there. Often you'll find that hidden in your root, hidden in that interest, whether you're interested in crochet or pottery or something, you're wanting to serve and help in some way, you'll find that spark. And so follow that purpose and be cautious of influence from outside. Don't listen to society. It doesn't know what it wants from you. It doesn't know at all, and gives you crazy mixed signals, especially in our society. If you're female, it's got, you are not in a situation where you can actually gain approval. Yeah. So if you're at home and you look after children and so on, you're going to get approval and disdain in equal measure. If you say, right, that's it, I'm going to go out and I'm going to work and do a business, you're going to get disdain and approval in equal measure. It's very confusing. Where we want, well, it's, men have our own confusions as well. You and I have been told since we were young at the same time that we should be loyal, faithful, honorable men, never cheat on a woman. But we're also told that our status as a man and our position in society is directly connected with how many women we manage to have. Those are some two very confusing, conflicting values to sort of tell us. Well, which one's true there? Are we meant to be good, loyal men, or are we meant to be these sort of dominant and powerful sort of what are we wanting from us? And there's these double standards all across our society, it's very confusing and controlling. One of my friends, he's a fabulous man. He chose to have a very simple job, low effort, low reward, so he could make fabulous artworks in his spare time and be a dad. He was the best father you could imagine, never too tired to play and never too busy either. He really lived a retirement lifestyle. When he died, people were standing around his grave, and I was surprised to hear them say, it's a pity, and they mentioned his name, didn't ever live up to his full potential. I thought, what? He produced the most amazing works of art you could ever imagine. These are like unbelievable. What a great dad he was, and that garden he had. What potential are you talking about? They just meant money. Now, I'm not saying money isn't nice or important. It's really easy to say, oh, don't worry about money when you're okay financially. I'm just saying, let's not let it control you too much in life. Let's not put that over some of these other genuine expressions as well. And the same with status and approval. Incidentally, though, all these things come to you if you do follow that genuine path. You can't hide it. Yeah. And we're back to what we started off with. I was saying about the man with the board. If you meet a potter who is a master of their art, imagine if she's standing behind her stall and those pots have been produced, she's been practicing for, doing 2 hours a day pottery, and they are outstanding. When you walk up, they say hello. That's it. You don't need to sell the pots. You don't need to say, good to meet you. I am the most amazing potter you'll ever meet. I've gone through an apprenticeship with this great Japanese master. I'm the leading, this is my pottery award and everything. The pots are good enough that everyone goes, wow, and buys them. You can't hide that. And in fact, rewards and success and status and attention come their way naturally. So the genuine method in the end beats all cheating or lying or boastfulness or superficial attempts. It actually does do that. It's just sort of a bit slower at the beginning of the bell curve, or instead of being sort of like this, it's a bit like that. And then you can go to the top, and but make sure that you keep keep that humility and those values, when you're there. It's I think that's the important thing when the blessings come, because it's inside, change yourself, the world, there's a big reflection in the world. When that happens, make sure you do good with it. Remember who you are, because that can be corrupting too.
Very interesting indeed. So I'm wondering what happens next in your development in terms of Franz Bardon's system, your personal development. You start off with, you've described these exercises that share, I think, qualities with mindfulness meditation, or perhaps concentration meditations and psychotherapy. You reference those sorts of things in explaining those initial exercises of Franz Bardon. More presence for those 10 minutes, more retention of memory, and also beginning to see what's in the mind and see what's going on and so on. So, and that producing a sort of insight as well as a certain kind of tranquility or stability.
Yes.
Well, but it gets quite esoteric, doesn't it?
Yes. So, and then that's really one of the reasons. It's he wrote 3 books, and this is all a hermetic path. So, though in this kind of interviewing, and you may notice it's very rare I'll talk about these kind of things, even on my channel and so on. I'm very cautious about this kind of discussion. This is for sort of a teacher-student kind of thing. But you don't need to have a sort of a belief in the sort of higher forces or in anything outside the psychological system to follow this path. I think you'll be surprised as you go along. And it's a system out there of 10 steps in this first book, Initiation to Hermetics, and then there's the next 2 books, and this as you say, get far more esoteric, far more spiritual as you go along. And this isn't for everyone. This is a sort of a calling for many of us to sort of practice these kind of things. But it's also important to let you know that, I'm interested in all areas. So I'm interested in memory techniques. I think, we were talking about this a little bit before the interview. There you go. We're mentioning that top tip for interviews: don't talk about everything exciting before it. Otherwise, the interview doesn't have the energy. Top tip for writing: don't tell people about your book. Because every time you're talking out, your mind says, okay, I've got it out. Yeah, keep it in and get it on paper. With memory, so I'm interested in normal things as much as I am higher things, because for me, it's all kind of become one. So for me, every action is has got a higher aspect to it. Every word said has a power. Every object is a talisman. Every sentence is an incantation. For a lot of people, they say, as above, so below, or they say that they believe everything is one. They're looking for oneness. But then they decide that in that, some of it is more important than others. So these higher forces or higher consciousness or these kind of things, they're the real stuff. This is more of an illusion to be ignored. I've come to believe that it is all one and all linked, and you can't do that. Everything has a power. Everything has a strength. Everything is real. Everything's real. The Hermetic path tells us everything is formed of pure consciousness. If this is just a more physical version of what we can imagine in our minds, that does mean that it's all important. Your house and how it's laid out, what objects you're willing to own, what you're willing to have. So, for example, I know some people, they'll have books on black magic and items which are related to this. It's not their path. They wouldn't dream of such a thing. For me, that's not something I am going to be the custodian of. I'm not having this kind of thing. And everything is one. So your house, your mind, your clothes, your words, your posture, this is all part of the same thing. They're not separate closed systems. People sometimes create the opposite. They say this is real and all this stuff are the dreams and imagination. That's not true. They get confused either way. What they say on the internet isn't real because it's just a bit of fun and so on. But these are real people they're treating. So this kind of unified view of things. So I'm very excited by it on all levels. So if you tell me a way to remember someone's name, or to make sure I don't lose my keys, or make sure I remember that, or keep to a new habit or something, this is as important to me as if you were to tell me this is how you can visit a higher place, or talk to an angel, or these kind of what we'd see as being more spiritual things, or achieve a higher state of mind. The higher state of mind is here now between you and me as we're speaking now. This is our chance to be enlightened now. It's not in the future. This is the only opportunity we've got. So if I can fully engage with good intentions and pure focus and skillfulness with my words, then in this moment I can be enlightened. And if you listen with the same kind of qualities, this presence, this is the importance. So every word, thought, and action. Let's pay attention to that as much as we do other things.
Very interesting indeed. So I won't press you any further then on the details of your hermetic path and what it is, for example, that led you to meet Hermetic and Rosicrucian masters in Bohemia and seek out all these sorts of people. Actually, even if I was to press you, which I might on another occasion, I don't think we have time today. So I must petition you for a sequel, Martin.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, if you're watching this or listening to this, depending on what platform you're on, and you'd like to hear more, and maybe the next one should be meetings with extraordinary people. We can go through the masters in Japan and in America, in Bohemia, in Sri Lanka, all these teachers. Maybe we should go through the most influential, wonderful people and celebrate them.
Unsurprisingly, you read my mind. So that's exactly what I would hope for in the sequel as we're talking now. So perhaps I'll ask you one last question or one last sort of topic here. We were talking just before we started recording, hinting at Giordano Bruno's system of memory, Renaissance memory systems. You've written a lot about the art of memory. It's one of your specialisms. Your book, for example, The Hermetic Art of Memory, is an example of that. And you've demonstrated memory feats of various kinds on your YouTube channel. It's as you were just saying, another one of your great interests. And well, you told me that people said that Bruno's system doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. But you have proved that wrong. So could you say a little bit about who Bruno was, what his system is, why people have always said it doesn't work, and what you did to explore that?
So yes, Giordano Bruno was a Renaissance practitioner of the hermetic art of memory. Bruno himself was originally a Dominican monk, and he'd learned memory through that kind of Christian training. But even when he was young, he got in trouble. He was reading books he shouldn't do. And indeed, a lot of Bruno's life was him trying to say things in his works that would get him in trouble, and trying to hide them carefully. So he left the Dominican order and he toured through Europe. He actually met Queen Elizabeth I and some of the the practitioners around here probably had some interaction with him. And Bruno is known for he like to create memory systems, but they're not memory in the sense of just to recall. They're to lead to higher states of meditation that he called contraction. Contraction is samadhi, or satori to Bruno. Now, the most famous one is Bruno's memory wheels, which are letters in a wheel that you'd combine. He got them from Raymond Lull. And yes, almost every expert, in fact, I'm about to publish a book where someone says it again, says that these aren't usable. You can't actually do that. It's too hard. It's impossible. Because Bruno uses it both for memory of letters. So he always gives a mundane reason for memory technique, which is part of his trying not to get persecuted, which, in the end it failed. Bruno was actually burnt at the stake as a heretic in the end. Now, Bruno's memory wheels are based on they're a form of meditation, a contemplation on letters. And what he does is he associates a philosophical concept with each one of the letters, and there are two wheels of them. Now, for anyone who's watching this who understands Bardon's teachings or understands Kabbalah, this is actually what it is. It's a Kabbalistic meditation on letters and then combining those letters together. And yes, it is very hard to memorize, this whole sort of alphabet, and each one is a memory palace in its own. The letter H is the Aristotelian principles of the original causes and things like that. Or he has some Greek and Hebrew letters. They're quite abstract concepts. But I was convinced this is doable. It just required a lot more practice than people would normally do. So applying the same discipline we're talking about, an hour a night, month in, month out, testing myself, and it was on the edge of my ability, I did manage to memorize and turn Bruno's wheels, where you combine the letters in contemplation as a form of sort of achieving this kind of oneness. It took 7.5 hours, the whole meditation, which we'd think was crazy, but of course a Dominican monk like Bruno would be used to these feats. And yes, if you want to have a look, that was on I actually performed these memory wheels on the Unknown Philosophers podcast. Imagine that you've got 500 people watching you, and they've all got the copy of the book, so they can have a look and see if you get it right. And you're saying, yes, I have memorized the wheel, I will perform it now. And people call out the letters. It was a tough performance. And it took a lot of practice to lead up to it. But yes, these are doable. And there's a lot of this wisdom in the Western tradition, which people have forgotten about. And it's part of my mission to bring that back. It's something I can report about when we do our sequel.
That would be very interesting indeed. You mentioned to me also before that these, and you've said it here, that Renaissance methods, memory methods that lead to enlightenment or towards achieving enlightenment. Can you say something? I know we're now coming to the end of our time. Is it possible in a brief amount of time to say something about how that works or how that functions?
Yes. So the modus operandi, the way they used to meditate, and they even used the term meditatio or meditatio mnemonica, was by imagination. And the reason why it's memory is to do with recollection, is what allows you to sort of achieve that oneness. So let's imagine a yogic practitioner wanted to achieve oneness with the original idea of love. They wanted to meditate on love. To do this, they would probably modernly either use a mantra and just repeat some kind of mantra that's connected with that, or imagine an image or a gesture, or all three, a mantra, a mudra, a mandala. or they may just think about it very, contemplate it, really explore it, think about it. And they would achieve a kind of oneness through this that they'd call the samadhi. The Renaissance practitioner would do the same, but through memory. So let's imagine they might visualize an angel. I think it would be Jophiel, an angel that represents love. And they would memorize information. What does what does her clothing mean? What's she holding in her hand? They'd have a symbolic quality for each one of the feathers on her wings. They'd have symbolism behind everything about her body. They'd have poems and connected with each one. So this memory, and if you really try to remember, your focus is so strong that they'd achieve this oneness. It's kind of an energetic connection. So that's the method that was mostly used in the Renaissance. They also used to like to puzzle things out. Sometimes they'd have a picture or a riddle that was a mystery, a bit like a koan, or actually in yoga, there were sort of questions to meditate on. So the techniques were comparable. Incidentally, these memory image techniques, they do exist in India as well. You do get people, to imagine the figure of Green Tara, or you imagine Avalokitesvara or something, you're going to be visualizing someone and going through this as an image. This is also in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. But yes, that's their main technique. But also the creation of a memory palace, an actual building to walk around in your imagination, full of objects with symbolic power and emblems that would change your consciousness by imprinting them in your mind. There was a common belief at the time, anything you remembered, you would become. It would change who you are, like putting in a new program or new way of being.
That's so interesting, and I can't wait for the sequel to this episode. Martin, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you for listening to another Guru Viking podcast. For more interviews like these, as well as articles, videos, and guided meditations, visit www.guruviking.com.